Hi everyone, Dusan here from Garden of Chess. In this week's analysis, I will go through a recent Grandmaster game between Hikaru Nakamura and world champion Magnus Carlsen. Before we start, I'll just give you some background information about the game. Nakamura and Carlsen clashed in the semi-final of the Lindores Abbey online tournament, and Magnus Carlsen, being the world champion, was the heavy favourite to win. He got off to a very good start in their matchup. So the matchup was played over 3 days, and he won the first mini-match on the first day. So Nakamura was behind, and Nakamura needed to win the next 2 mini matches, so the next 2 days, in order to go through. And all Carlsen needed to do is win one of those 2 days left. So this is the second day. It's the first game of the second day, and Nakamura is looking to even the match. So we'll see what happens. Nakamura is white, and he started with pawn to e4. Carlsen played e5, knight f3, knight c6, bishop e5, knight f6. So this is leading into the Berlin defense. And the most common move used to be castles, where black captures the pawn, and then we have d4, knight d6, bishop takes c6, and then knight f5, queen takes queen, king takes queen. So this is the typical position in the Berlin defense, and Vladimir Kramnik used this really well as black against Garry Kasparov in their World Championship match, which Kramnik managed to win. So famously, Garry Kasparov, the best player in the world, some would say of all time, but definitely at that time when he played Kramnik, couldn't win a single game against Vladimir Kramnik. Although he tried multiple times, he couldn't win a single game. They were all drawn. So the Berlin defense is very solid, and at the top level, a lot of players now play d3, which is called the anti-Berlin. So move to d3 instead of castles is the anti-Berlin. This is the move that Carlsen made popular, and then many other players started to play like Carlsen, including Nakamura. So Nakamura is using Carlsen's weapon against him. So then bishop to g4, creating a pin. h3, and Carlsen plays bishop h5. Nakamura goes for this early g4. So this is risky. If the bishop goes back, the king is a little bit weakened, but on the other hand, these pawns are very solid, and they restrict black's pieces. So they restrict the bishop and also the knight. But in the game, Carlsen played a very interesting move, and this made the game very exciting. Knight takes pawn. Takes. So many of you would recognize this sacrifice from the Italian game. So what does that achieve? Black has sacrificed a knight for 2 pawns, but this pin is now extremely difficult for white to get out of. The fact that white doesn't have a pawn on g2 means that the knight doesn't have many good defenders, and obviously the queen can't really move out of the way, otherwise it's just a free knight on f3. So the pin is very powerful. In the long run, black hopes to get more pieces to attack the knight, so he might get a queen to f6 sometimes. Other times he might push f5 and try and get a rook to the f-file. Eventually he's hoping to castle queenside and attack the king on g1, because obviously the king on g1 doesn't have pawns in front of it to protect it. Bishop e7, king h1, so that makes space for the rook on g1. And there's a little trick in this position. After Carlsen played h5, if white captures the pawn, black would play e4. and this would be winning for black, because the knight is attacked, it is pinned, it can't really move, because white loses a queen if the knight moves, and if white takes, queen takes queen, and then bishop takes knight, with a fork picking up the rook, which would leave black up a rook. And are there any other pawns? No, it's just a rook with equal number of pawns, but still easily winning for black. So definitely not pawn takes pawn, and obviously Nakamura wouldn't miss such a move. He played knight c3, f4, bishop d2. So this drives the bishop back, and these pawns are now restricting white's pieces. So it leaves the bishop kind of stuck and not really able to help white's defense. g5. Have a look at those pawns rolling down the board towards the white king. So white is looking like he's in trouble here. And he went knight b1, hoping to get the knight to d2 eventually to defend the knight on f3. So Nakamura definitely with his back up against the wall here. And Carlsen grabs the pawn. He will also win the rook for the bishop. So this puts black up on points. So black now has a rook and 3 pawns for 2 knights, which means black is ahead by 2 points effectively. However, I think that this might have been a slight mistake by Carlsen. When I analyzed this with a computer engine after the game, I was looking at this move here, queen d7, trying to castle as quickly as possible. There's a little trick if white takes the pawn. Takes, it looks like white has managed to swap queens and nothing bad is going to happen, but there is this intermezzo in between check, and when the king moves, black takes the knight, which leaves black up, I think, a pawn or two, 1 pawn, but still with a much better position with the 2 bishops, and really nice pawns here. So for that reason, knight takes pawn is not a good move for white. White would probably play bishop c3, and then according to engine analysis, it was something like this, defending that pawn, and this position is effectively winning for black. Even though black is still down by 2 pawns for a knight, he has managed to castle. This king on h1 is very, very poorly placed, because black is going to just push down those pawns. And when eventually he opens up lines towards the king, those of you who remember opposite sides castling from another game that I did a couple of weeks ago, will remember how dangerous that is for white. So all black is doing is putting his rooks behind those pawns and push the pawns down the board to open up files towards white's king. And this is actually very, very difficult to stop for white. If you look on the other side, black's king is very safe, and it's very difficult for white to actually get to that king. Anyway, this is something that Carlsen could have played, but in the game he thought, I'll just win this pawn and I'll win the rook for the bishop. He didn't probably calculate some of the lines well enough, and the problem for black is that he has to lose some of these pawns, and more importantly, it's very difficult to get this king safe. Black would love to castle if he could, but the problem is this sneaky queen on g1 can take the pawn on a7, and this king is not any safer on c8. There's also knight takes pawn at some stage, which would attack the square on d7, or the king on d7 if it has to go there. So all of this is making the king on e8 a bit vulnerable. So in the game, I'll just fast forward a little bit to an interesting point. Nakamura goes for an attack, so he brings his queen towards the black king, which is stuck in the middle. He wants to go queen d7 check, and then when the king goes to f8, that queen is going to end up on f7 with a checkmate. But this gives Carlsen time to check the white king. And this is where Carlsen had a forced draw. He could have just played queen g3 and made a perpetual check. So obviously white can't escape the perpetual, white needs to take the perpetual check. But it's a very, very complicated position. It's a very difficult decision to make from Carlsen's point of view, whether he should actually go for this perpetual check. He made the wrong choice, so he actually blundered in this position. The best move for black is to go rook d8. And this is a winning move which the engines found after the game, and some grandmasters that were analyzing the game with engines proved that it was winning for black. But it's very, very difficult. There's this amazing move, rook d5, which sacrifices a rook in order to block the queen, to stop the queen from checkmating the black king. And then Carlsen would have played f3, threatening mate. And I'll just show you some of the beautiful lines that computers have analyzed here. So there is rook f2, g3. Notice that if rook takes, black has a deadly attack, so it'll be queen h2 check, g2 check, and then black is going to promote to a queen with check, and it's going to be a checkmate very quickly. So the main line goes knight takes, and then there is this queen trade, which gives black an endgame that should be winning. So this is a difficult endgame to play, but with a rook and 2 pawns versus 2 minor pieces, especially with this outside pass pawn, black should be winning. And then there was this even trickier line where white tries to run with his king. Now white is threatening checkmate, threatening queen f7 with mate. So black needs to act fast. g2, check from the queen. King d2, it looks like the king is safe because there aren't any checks, but there is the pawn takes rook, promoting to a knight. Can you believe that? And then black is actually winning. Check. It looks like the king is safe again, but queen e1 check, sacrificing the queen. Check. Then the knight that was just promoted delivers a deadly fork. And in the end, with the trade of queens, black is winning the endgame. So that was a really, really wild line, and it's something that grandmasters would really struggle to see if they couldn't have an engine helping them. So king f2, so that was the crazy promotion to a knight. Alright, so unfortunately for Carlsen, he didn't play rook d8, which is the winning move. He didn't play queen g3, which gets a perpetual check. He played g3, and this backfired. Knight f3, the knight comes back to the defense, stopping the checkmate. And very calmly, Nakamura just moves the rook to e1. So now the point is, if queen h1 check, king f2, the king is actually safe on f2. Black can promote, but white's just going to take with the rook, and that's going to be safe for white. And in the game, Carlsen took, so there was some checks. Maybe Carlsen thought that Nakamura was going to take a perpetual check now, but Nakamura just played bishop b4, a quiet move, aiming for the e7 square. Now the threat is queen e7 checkmate, defended by the bishop. And it's a very strange position around the white king. You have this queen, you have the pawn, you have the rook, all kind of aiming towards the white king, but there is no way to actually check the king. It's strange, but the pawn on g2 is really stopping black's attack. It's helping white's king find a safe shelter. So this is called the umbrella. Some of you might recognize this as the umbrella, shielding the white king. If black plays queen f1 check, white just calmly takes. queen, and white takes. Obviously no more attack. So there is actually no way for black to safely check the white king, which means that his king on e8 is completely vulnerable and it's just going to get checkmated. This queen on f3 can't even get back to defend the black king. So an amazing position. The reason why I chose this game is exactly because of this position, because you have black threatening white's king, and then Nakamura is smart enough to realize that his king is actually safe, and he calmly just goes on to attack the black king. So in the game, Carlsen played c5, which doesn't really make a difference. Bishop takes pawn. And now after queen f7 check, Nakamura resigned. So let's see why black actually resigned. And this might be a good exercise for you to do at home. Have a look at the 3 different squares that the black king can move to. And a really helpful exercise for you to practice checkmates is to work out for yourself what would happen if the king goes to either of those squares. So this is a good time to pause the video and then analyze. If the king goes to d8, can you see a checkmate? If the king goes to c8, if the king goes to c6. So this would be a good time to go ahead, pause the video, and then we'll compare whether you got the right answer. So if the king goes back to d8, the best way is either bishop e7 check or queen e7 check. Let's go with queen e7 check because it's the same as in the other line when the king goes to c8. So this is the same position as if the king goes straight to c8. Now if the king goes to b8, queen takes rook is checkmate. If the king goes to d8, then we have bishop e7, that's the key move, forcing the king to e8, and then discovered check, and queen e7 checkmate. So the bishop and the queen team up extremely well against the vulnerable black king. And finally, if the king goes to c6, check, and there are multiple ways to do the checkmate. The easiest one is probably a4 check. If the king goes to a6, it's queen c4 check, and then b5 queen takes. If king a5, queen b5 checkmate. And king a5, there should be a pretty easy one. Let's just say bishop a7. So if the king goes to a6, nope, sorry, I stuffed that one up. Let's say bishop d4. I think that's much smarter. So if the king goes to a6, queen b5. If the pawns block, the queen takes, so that doesn't make a difference. b5, queen takes is checkmate. So king takes a4. And we have different ways of doing it. Let's go with queen c4 and rook a1, checkmate. And then let's just go back to this position. If the king takes the pawn, there are multiple ways, but let's just say queen c4 check and rook a1 checkmate. So that was a lot of lines, but for top grandmasters, this is what they can do in their sleep. If you give this position to them blindfolded, they can do the checkmate really easily. So that's why when Nakamura played queen f7, Carlsen resigned, knowing that Nakamura's worked out the checkmate. So a really, really exciting game there, guys. Quite a lot to learn from that game. From the turning point in the game point of view, this was definitely it here. So Carlsen could have taken the perpetual check. Instead, he chose to go for a win, which is the right judgment because black is winning, but he played the wrong move. So instead of playing rook d8 and the amazing rook d5, he played g3, which allowed white to stop his attack. And then, unfortunately, there was no defense for the black king. So I hope you guys enjoyed that video. A very, very exciting game. I personally really enjoyed watching that. And there are many top-level games that you can follow online. So websites that I would recommend are either Chess24 or Chess.com to actually view top online games. Thank you all very much, and I will see you next week.